The night was loud with excitement. People filled the giant hall, their voices rising like a storm as they waited for the music show to begin. The stage lights flickered, guitars leaned on their stands, and the air smelled of heat and sweat from the crowd pressing close together. Everyone wanted the best view. Everyone wanted to be heard. Keanu Reeves stood quietly near the back. He wore a simple black jacket, nothing flashy, nothing that called attention. Most people did not even notice him at first. He looked like just another man who had come to enjoy music. But his eyes carried calm, and his posture was gentle, like someone who did not want to push forward, even though many others tried to shove their way to the front. Suddenly, tension broke out in the crowd. A group of young men argued with an older couple about who had the right to stand in a certain spot. The young men shouted, their voices sharp and full of fire. The older man tried to explain, but his words were drowned by anger. Hands were raised, and people around began to step back, afraid the fight would break. In moments like these, kindness is often forgotten. The crowd wanted entertainment, not patience. Anger felt louder, stronger, more powerful. But anger also burned fast, leaving only ashes. Keanu saw it all. He could have looked away. He could have decided it was not his problem. But something inside him did not let him ignore it. He slowly moved forward, his steps steady, his face calm. He placed himself between the angry voices, not with force, not with pride, but with quiet presence. The young men looked at him with surprise. They expected another person to yell, to take sides, or to challenge them. Instead, Keanu spoke in a soft tone that carried more weight than shouting ever could. "No one is winning here," he said. "We are all here for music, not for anger. Look around you. Everyone came for joy, not for a fight." His words were simple, but they fell into the air like stones dropping into water. The noise of the crowd softened. The older couple stopped shaking. The young men looked uneasy. For a moment, it seemed like the fire in their voices began to fade, but conflict never ends that easily. One of the young men, filled with pride, pushed forward and said, "Why should we listen to you? Who are you to tell us what to do?" Keanu did not answer with his name. He did not raise his voice. He simply placed a gentle hand on the man's arm and looked into his eyes. "I am just someone who believes anger takes away more than it gives," he said. "Is this really how you want to remember tonight? Do you want your memory of this? Music to be about shouting or about sharing something beautiful together?" The hall grew quieter. People nearby began to watch closely. The spotlight of the stage had not yet turned on, but in that moment, the spotlight was on Keanu and the choice he was making. Inside his mind, Keanu remembered his own struggles, the nights when he faced loss, pain, and loneliness. He knew how easy it was to let anger take control, but he also knew how powerful it was when someone chose patience instead. The young men lowered their voices, though one of them still looked restless. The older couple whispered thanks under their breath. The crowd slowly returned to waiting for the show, but their eyes carried a new respect for the man who had calmed the storm without force. And yet, deep inside the tension, there was something building, something that would not end tonight. Kindness had stopped the fight for now, but not everyone agreed with it. Resentment still burned in some hearts, and before the night was over, Keanu would face a test far greater than just words. The music finally began, drums rolling like thunder, guitars crying through the speakers, and lights flashing across the hall. The crowd roared, forgetting the earlier tension for a while. Voices blended with the music, hands waved in the air, and the whole place moved like one giant wave of sound and energy. Keanu stood still for a moment, watching the joy return. He smiled faintly, as if relieved that the night had shifted back to what it was meant to be. Yet behind that calm smile, he knew something more was coming. The faces of the young men he had spoken to earlier still carried shadows. Their pride had not been fully quieted. As the band played louder, People pushed closer to the stage. The energy grew wild. Bodies collided. Laughter turned to shouts, and small fights of space broke out again. The same young men were now in the middle of it. One of them bumped into a woman spilling her drink. She gasped, anger rising in her eyes. But before she could say a word, the man barked at her as if it was her fault. The crowd around them stiffened. Whispers spread quickly. The woman's friend tried to defend her, but his voice was swallowed by noise. The young men laughed, loud and careless, as if they had won some battle no one else could understand. Keanu moved again, slipping through the crowd. He was not fast, not forceful, but people seemed to step aside for him without realizing why. When he reached the group, he did not scold. He did not threaten. Instead, he picked up the cup that had fallen, handed it back to the woman, and said softly, "Sometimes accidents happen. What matters is how we respond to them." The woman's eyes softened. She took the cup with trembling hands, surprised that someone had spoken for her in such a calm way. But the young men did not like it. One of them leaned close to Keanu, his breath hot with alcohol, his words sharp like a knife. "Are you trying to be a hero?" he sneered. "Do you think people care what you say? This is a show, not a classroom." Keanu did not blink. His voice stayed steady, low enough to be calm, but strong enough to cut through the music. "I am not here to be a hero," he said. "I am here to remind us that kindness makes a night worth remembering. Anger only leaves regret." His words seemed to push against the man's pride. The young man shoved him back, expecting resistance. But Keanu did not resist. He stood firm, steady as a rock, but with no anger in his body. The crowd noticed. Whispers grew louder now, not of fear, but of curiosity. Who was this man who chose peace again and again, even when others tried to pull him into conflict? Somewhere near the stage, a camera caught the scene. A flash of light, a tiny blink, but enough to record Keanu's calm face in the middle of chaos. The music raged on, but in that corner of the hall, another story was playing. A story of pride clashing with patience, of anger pushing against kindness. The young men stepped back for now, muttering curses under their breath. They wanted to fight, but something about Keanu's calm unsettled them. It was as if the fire in their chest had no fuel when faced with his quiet presence. The woman whispered, "Thank you." Keanu only nodded and moved back into the crowd, not wanting to hold attention. But attention had already found him. People began to notice him more. Some whispered his name when they finally recognized him, though he gave no sign that he wanted fame. He kept his head down, letting the music wash over him like everyone else. Yet deep inside, he knew the night was not over. Conflict had only paused, not ended. Resentment still waited, building like a storm at the edge of the horizon. The band played harder, their voices rising above the storm of drums and strings. The crowd jumped and swayed, carried away by rhythm. For a while, joy returned, as if the earlier tension had dissolved. People laughed, sang along, and threw their hands into the air, chasing the sound. But anger has a way of hiding, waiting for the right moment to return. The young men who had clashed with Keanu were still watching him. Their pride was wounded, not by fists or insults, but by something far heavier, by being made small in front of others through kindness. When the music slowed for an acoustic set, the hall grew quieter. Lights dimmed into a soft glow, and the band sang a ballad about love and loss. Many in the crowd swayed gently, some holding on to friends, some wiping tears. Keanu stood still, his eyes closed, letting the gentle notes pull him into memory. He thought of nights long past, of people he had lost, of moments where kindness had been his only anchor against pain. Music always carried him there, to the edge of sadness and hope. And then, it happened. One of the young men moved through the crowd, pushing people aside, his eyes locked on Keanu. He reached him and spilled his drink onto Keanu's jacket on purpose. Gasps filled the air around them. People turned, waiting for the moment to explode. The man smirked, waiting for anger. What now? Still going to preach kindness? Keanu looked down at his soaked jacket, then raised his eyes slowly. His face held no rage, only calm. "It is only a jacket," he said. "It can be washed, but your heart, if it stays filled—" "With anger, who will wash that?" The crowd grew silent. The music still played softly in the background, but every ear was now on these words. The man's smile faltered. Something in his chest shifted, but pride pushed back, refusing to let kindness win. He shoved Keanu again, harder this time. People gasped louder. Some shouted for security. Others pulled out phones, recording. But Keanu did not raise a fist. He did not even step back. Instead, he said, "You can push me. You can pour your anger on me, but I will not give you mine in return. Because this night is bigger than us. It belongs to everyone here." The woman from before, the one whose drink had been spilled, suddenly stepped forward. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice trembling but clear. Others in the crowd joined, murmuring words of support. It was no longer just Keanu standing against anger. It was many. Security guards rushed forward at last, trying to separate the man. The young men cursed and shouted, but the crowd's energy had shifted. It was no longer laughter at chaos, no longer silence in fear. It was strength born from seeing one man choose peace again and again. Keanu gently touched the guard's arm. "Please," he said softly, "do not throw them out. Let them stay. Maybe the music will still reach them." The guards hesitated, surprised, but nodded. The young men, now red with frustration, were left in the hall. They had not been humiliated by force. They had been given a chance, something harder to face than punishment. The music swelled again, as if the band felt the weight of the moment without even knowing its cause. The crowd cheered, not for the band alone, but for the quiet choice of kindness that had turned a storm into silence once more. But even as the sound lifted the hall, Keanu knew something important. Storms do not vanish in a single night. Some hearts were touched, some were softened, but some would hold on to anger like a shield. And before the show ended, the night would test him in a way no crowd had seen yet. The night reached its middle and the hall shook with rhythm. The crowd moved like a sea of restless waves, each person caught in the storm of sound. Lights flashed red, blue, and white, painting faces in colors that came and went like lightning. People sang, their voices mixed with joy and wildness, and for a while, the earlier conflict seemed like shadows slipping away. Keanu stood quietly, near the edge of the crowd now, his jacket still damp, but his spirit calm. He had faced anger, twice already, and each time he had chosen peace. But in the corner of his eyes he could still see the young men. They did not cheer, they did not sing. They watched. Their pride had been struck, and pride rarely let go so easily. As the band prepared for their biggest song of the night, the energy in the hall rose higher. The singer shouted, the crowd screamed back, and the lights exploded into brightness. People pushed closer, tighter, until movement became difficult. In that tightness, small sparks of anger began again. Shoves, curses, complaints. Suddenly, one of the young men shouted above the music, pointing at Keanu. "There he is! The man who thinks he's better than everyone!" The words spread fast, like fire through dry grass. People turned their heads. Some recognized Keanu now. Whispers of his name circled, some eyes filled with respect, others with curiosity, and a few with doubt. The young man pushed through, dragging his friends with him. "Say something now," he taunted. "Say your soft words. Show everyone your weak kindness." The crowd fell into tension again. The music played on, But here, in this small circle, silence pressed heavy. Everyone waited for Keanu's answer. He looked around, not at the men, but at the faces of strangers watching him. Some looked afraid, others angry, but most looked desperate. Desperate for something better than violence. Keanu took a breath and spoke, not loud, but steady enough to cut through the music. Strength is not shown by who can shout the loudest or push the hardest. Strength is shown by who can stay kind when the world chooses anger. A murmur spread. Some nodded, some clapped softly, but the young men only grew more restless. One of them suddenly pulled a chair from the side and threw it down, the crash echoing across the hall. Security moved again, but the crowd was split now. Half wanted the men thrown out, half wanted to see what Keanu would do. He stepped closer, his face calm, his eyes steady. "I will not fight you," he said, "but I will not let your anger rule this night either. Look around. These people came for music, not for hate. Don't take that from them." The leader of the group clenched his fists, shaking with rage. He wanted Keanu to snap, to shout, to strike. But Keanu's stillness felt heavier than any blow. The woman from before, now standing nearby, raised her voice. "He's right. This is not about anger. Let us enjoy the music." Others joined her. The sound of support grew. Soon it was louder than the taunts, louder than the anger. The crowd, once divided, began to rise together, not against the men, but for peace. The young men found themselves surrounded, not by fists, but by voices of calm, voices of unity. It was not humiliation. It was something harder. It was being shown that kindness could be stronger than pride. Keanu did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply bowed his head slightly as if thanking the crowd and stepped back. His role was never to lead them. It was only to remind them of what they could be. But even as the music grew louder, even as the crowd's spirit lifted again, he knew the night had not yet reached its hardest moment. Storms test most fiercely when they know they are about to break. The night pressed on. The band poured their energy into every song, sweat shining on their faces as the crowd shouted with wild excitement. The hall seemed alive, shaking with rhythm, glowing with light. People forgot their worries, at least for a while, and let the music carry them away. Keanu stood quietly again, close enough to feel the pulse of the music, but far enough to notice the crowd more than the stage. He saw the smiles, the tears, the laughter, and the way strangers leaned on each other when the songs grew heavy with emotion. He felt the beauty of it all, yet he also carried a weight inside. The young men had stepped back after the crowd had chosen peace, but they had not left. They lingered at the edges, their eyes dark with resentment. Their pride had been wounded more than once, and every wound made them burn hotter. As the band began their final set, the air grew thick with anticipation. This was the moment everyone had come for, the closing song, the one that would echo in their hearts when the night ended. People pushed closer. The lights dimmed, and silence hung in the hall for just a breath before the music crashed in like a wave. In that silence, a decision was made. The young men moved suddenly, pushing through the crowd with force. One of them grabbed the mic stand near the side of the stage, knocking it over. Another shouted insults loud enough to pierce the music. Chaos broke open again. The band faltered for a second, startled, but then kept playing. The crowd gasped, torn between fear and anger. Security tried to rush in, but the men were too quick, too loud, and too determined to ruin the night. Keanu stepped forward, his face calm though his heart beat heavy. He moved not as a fighter, not as a star, but as a man carrying the weight of choice. He reached the young men and stood in front of them, blocking their path to the stage. They shouted at him, cursed him, demanded he move. He did not. "This night belongs to everyone here," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the storm. If you want to ruin it, you will have to look into the eyes of all these people first. The crowd grew quiet, their attention locked on him. Hundreds of faces turned, waiting. The leader of the young men sneered. You think your words matter? You think kindness is stronger than anger? Keanu's eyes softened, but his tone carried. Wait, I do not think it. I know it, because look around. Anger makes noise, but kindness makes strength. The strength you cannot break. The crowd erupted, not with fear, but with voices rising together. They shouted for peace, for music, for the night they had come to remember. Their sound grew louder than the band, louder than the anger. The young men froze, their fire dimming under the flood of voices. They looked at each other, unsure. For the first time that night, their pride cracked and hesitation entered their eyes. Keanu stood steady, not raising his fists, not forcing them back, only showing that kindness had gathered an army greater than any anger could summon. The music swelled again as the band, moved by what they saw, played louder, pouring heart into every note. The hall vibrated with unity, with something far bigger than a fight. But inside Keanu's heart, he knew this was not the end. Pride does not vanish in a single night. It leaves shadows, and shadows often wait for the smallest light to fade before they strike again. The night was close to its end, but tension still lingered like smoke after a fire. The band played their final songs, and the crowd sang so loudly that the roof seemed ready to lift. Laughter, tears, and joy mixed in the air. To many, it was a night they would never forget. But at the edge of it all, shadows remained. The young men stood in silence now, their pride broken but their anger not gone. They had been pushed back by kindness, by the crowd's unity, yet something inside them still burned. They could not let the night close without striking one more time. As the last song ended and the lights dimmed, the crowd began to move toward the exits, still buzzing with excitement. Keanu walked slowly, his steps calm, blending in with strangers. He had not come for attention. He only wanted to be another face in the sea. But fate often finds those who try to walk quietly. Near the exit doors, the young men waited. They had chosen their final moment, away from music, away from the stage, where no voices of the band could cover what they planned. When Keanu passed, they stepped forward, blocking his path. The leader spoke, his voice low and sharp. You think you won tonight? You think your soft words made a difference, but kindness is weakness. Out here, no one will cheer for you. The crowd thinned, but some people nearby noticed. Whispers spread again, tension rising like a tide. Keanu looked at the young man, his face carrying no fear. Kindness is never weakness, he said. It takes more strength to stay calm than to strike. You are angry because you think respect is taken by force, but respect comes from what we give, not what we demand. The young man's fist tightened. For a moment, it seemed he would strike. The hall's air froze. The people watching held their breath. And then, something unexpected happened. An older man from the crowd, the same one who had been caught in the first argument earlier in the night, stepped forward. His voice was shaky but firm. He is right, he said. This night is not about anger. He gave me peace when I was close to losing it. Don't throw that away. Others joined him. The woman from before spoke up too. We saw what he did. We saw what he chose. It takes courage to stay kind. If you cannot see it now, maybe one day you will. Their words did what fists never could. They surrounded the young men, not with violence, but with truth. The leader lowered his hand slowly. His eyes flickered, pride still burning. But for the first time, doubt entered. He looked at Keanu, but Keanu only nodded slightly as if to say, the choice is yours. No one clapped. No one cheered. Silence held the moment, heavy and raw. Finally, the young men stepped back. They muttered curses, but their steps carried no strength. The crowd parted for them, and they left into the night. Keanu stood still, his shoulders heavy with the weight of it all. He had faced anger not once, not twice, but again and again, and each time he had chosen kindness. And now, the night was, closing not with a fight, but with a lesson carved into the hearts of all who had seen it. Yet deep inside, Keanu knew one truth. Kindness is not about winning or losing. It is about planting something that may grow long after the moment has passed. Whether those men changed or not, the seed had been placed. The night air was cool outside the hall. People spilled onto the streets, still buzzing with the afterglow of the music. Laughter echoed, footsteps hurried, and the city lights painted soft colors across faces, tired but happy. Keanu walked quietly among them, blending into the crowd as he always wished to. He did not speak of what had happened inside. He did not seek thanks or recognition. For him, the night was not about being seen. It was about being true to himself. Yet whispers followed him. Strangers who had witnessed everything spoke softly to one another. "Did you see what he did? He stayed calm when others lost control. He reminded us what kindness looks like." The words carried like ripples, reaching ears far beyond where he walked. The woman who had been defended earlier walked up to him. She smiled, her eyes wet with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for me, but for everyone here tonight. You showed us something we forget too often." Keanu gave a small nod, his voice gentle. "We all forget sometimes. That's why we must remind each other. Kindness is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us." Her smile widened. She knew those words were not only for her, but for anyone who would hear them later. As the crowd thinned, Keanu found himself walking alone down a quiet street. The noise of the show faded behind him, replaced by the hum of the city. He breathed deeply, the cool air filling his chest, and in that silence he reflected. He thought of the young men, their faces hard with pride, their voices sharp with anger. He wondered if the seeds planted in their hearts tonight would ever grow. He hoped they would. But he also knew that change takes time. Sometimes, kindness works slowly, like rain carving through stone. What mattered was that he had chosen it, again and again. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. He thought of his own past, the losses he had carried, the pain he had endured, the moments when anger could have taken him but never did. Kindness had saved him, and tonight it had saved others too. As he reached the corner of the street, he saw a group of young fans laughing, holding tickets and posters. They had recognized him now, but they did not rush him. Instead, one of them stepped forward and said, "We saw everything tonight. We will remember it." Keanu smiled faintly, his eyes soft. "Remember this," he said. "Music fades, nights end, but the way we treat each other lasts longer than any song." The fans nodded, and as he walked away, their laughter softened into quiet reflection. The city lights shimmered on the pavement, and the night grew still. The music show would be remembered by many as one of the best performances of the band, but for those who had witnessed the moments of conflict, it would be remembered for something else. They would remember a man who stood in the middle of chaos and chose kindness again and again, until even anger itself had no place left to stay. And though Keanu walked into the night with no spotlight, no applause, his choice had touched hearts. It had become part of their stories now, part of what they would carry forward. Because in a crowded music show, when anger tried to rule, one man had shown that kindness was still stronger.